Welcome to Reddit Aliens. Night shift workers of Reddit, what's the scariest experience you've had while on the job? Not safe for work? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy. Taking my first deceased patient to the hospital morgue in the middle of the night. It's in the basement, and getting to the morgue wasn't straightforward. There's a lot of turns and dimly lit hallways. At the time, the morgue was being renovated. I was freaking out because there was no room left in the morgue, and there was an unattended, occupied stretcher in the doorway. When I was 18, I worked closing shift at BK, and we got robbed, had a gun shoved in my face, and they put us in the walk-in freezer. They got away with over $10,000, but the morons stole the manager's car and left a gun in it that was registered to one of them. Then, he turned on the others. Trauma nights on general surgery. We had a teen who was shot 9 times, ran the code, did all the things including thoracotomy, so we had opened his chest to access his heart. He still died. I was sitting outside the trauma bay writing the note, janitorial staff cleaning the trauma bay, lots of blood and debris, and about 9 minutes after the end of the code and calling it, he sits up on the table, full sit-up, under the tarp, and belts out a guttural groan. Janitor staff pretty much all died and or shit their pants. We all ran in and restarted the code. Even got some pulses, electrical activity. But yeah, story still ends with him dying. Lots of theories about what actually caused it. Lazarus effect or just spontaneous diaphragmatic spasm. But yeah, it was absolutely crazy. And I don't think anyone would fault or blame the janitorial staff for shitting their pants or freaking out like that. That would be pretty frightening. I was working night shift in a gas station truck stop in Tucumcari, New Mexico, back in the mid-90s. I had another guy working with me who ran the diesel side while I worked the gas side. We had a guy come in around 1 or 2 a.m. and just looked at stuff in the aisles for a while before he left. Didn't really think twice about him. Later, about 6 a.m. when I got off, I drove home past a convenience store named All Sup. They're big in the Southwest. There had to have been 30 cop cars in the parking lot. There aren't even 30 cops in Tucumcari, so where they came from I have no idea. Come to find out that sometime during the night, the Allsups had been robbed and the clerk had been taken into the cooler, tied up, and beheaded. I found that out when I, day sleeper, was awoken by the state police a few hours later and asked if I had seen anything suspicious during the night. That guy who came in and left was the only thing I could think of. The police took a copy of our security footage, which led them to a suspect who was later convicted for the murder. I can't even begin to tell you how hard it was to go back to work the next day. We kind of assumed that the guy was going to rob us first, but didn't want to deal with 2 clerks, so he left and hit All Sups instead. Well, it's not night, but really early morning. One night, my girlfriend at the time woke me up in the middle of the night because I liked some girl's picture, someone I knew in high school's business page. I always try to support friends' business by liking or sharing their page. She continued to argue with me all night, knowing I had to wake up early in the morning. At the time, I was driving for city transit, so it's finally time for work, and I got maybe 2 hours of sleep at most. I get there and I'm super tired. I probably should have called off, but I needed the hours. So I blasted down some energy drinks and started my day. There are 2 sides of the route. The side I started on only took like 30 minutes to get to downtown. So I get into downtown and I'm picking up people. Then I realize I'm at the other end of the line. And some guy is getting off my bus saying thank you for getting him where he needed to go very fast. And I did an excellent job at driving. Mind you, I don't remember picking up this guy at all. And from downtown to the other side's end of the line was a 2-hour ride. I had 2 hours of unaccounted time go by. I was so scared because I couldn't remember any of it. For all I know, anything could have happened. I got to the end of the line and called the dispatcher and let them know I was feeling real sick and needed a relief. About 45 minutes later, someone relieved me, and I went home with my heart still racing. I never drove sleep deprivation again. A scary lesson learned, and thankfully I didn't hurt no one and hit anything. Worked overnight in a very old but still functional hospital. The building was in disrepair, but still had patients and staff. We were installing gigabit Ethernet to the top floors and corners so they could put a data center up there. I was up in a remote comms cupboard around 1 a.m. The only other people in the building were nursing staff and patients, who were locked, yes, locked in the wards downstairs. So I'm busy clearing out this old comms cupboard when the door behind me shut. It was wedged open with a fire extinguisher. I didn't hear anything or see anyone. I switched my phone torch on and opened the door, and the fire extinguisher was gone. It must have taken me 5 seconds to turn on my torch and leave the room. The corridor the room was in was long, probably a few hundred feet in each direction, only a few doors off the corridor into old patients' rooms. I tried every door, locked. I couldn't find the fire extinguisher either. I checked in the room, behind the door, in the bins, so I went down to security office and reported the incident, suggesting there may be somebody unauthorized loose in the building. They played the CCTV back along the corridor, and sure enough, some guy dressed in all black with bare feet just walks up silently to the cupboard and then grabs the fire extinguisher and legs it down the corridor extremely quickly. The security dudes flew into action, but the guy was never caught, and as far as I know. I was an overnight valet at a hotel, and our overflow lot was a couple blocks away. I was walking back from the lot after parking a car around 1 a.m., and I started to get this really uncomfortable gut feeling. I looked around and noticed the guy in a hoodie about 50 feet behind me. This was in a business district, so it's unusual to see people walking around there late at night, and it was also summer, so a hoodie is a little out of place. But I didn't want to jump to assuming this guy was some kind of murderer. I picked up my pace anyway just in case, and he picked up his. When I turned at the next block, he turned. He was also gaining on me pretty quick. I was real freaked out at this point, so I pulled out my pocket knife and ran as fast as I could back to the hotel. I don't know at what point he stopped following me, but I refused to park any more cars in the overflow lot that night and ended up finding a new job not long after. Charter bus driver. Picked up a group of drunk people up from a late nightlife central around 3 a.m. We were going around 50 kilometers an hour on a main road at the time, and one passenger opened the sliding door to throw up. Had to get the other passengers to hold him back from falling out of the bus before I could safely stop and let him out. I've been working my shift at the local bakery. Honestly, my answer only qualifies because it happened to be a night shift, not because it was specifically a night, but it was a horror for me nonetheless. Been working there for 3 days, making pastries, donuts, croissants, etc. The cleaner just mopped the floor with a really old, disgusting, stinky rag, like a piece of a potato sack. Honestly, it was making the floor dirtier rather than cleaning it. And next moment, I dropped a piece of dough on the floor. It was still wet, stinky, and disgusting, with our dirty boot prints and threads that fell from that old rug. Naturally, I picked up the dough I dropped, now wet and dirty as well, and was heading to a trash bin to throw it away. But the woman working next to me yelled, "Stop! We don't waste the dough," grabbed it from me, and added it to her dough he had on her table. I was dumbstruck. She effing used that dough from wet, dirty, and stinky floor to make someone's donut. I nearly threw up just thinking about it. That was really my scariest experience. It happened 12 years ago, and I still don't buy anything from bakeries. I either bake myself or avoid bakery products like the plague. Boy, if we did a video on restaurant workers and the gross or nasty things we've seen or been a part of, that might be a 5-hour video. The summer between high school and college, I worked at a grocery store that was near several 24/7 factories. We stayed open until after the lunch shift for the late night crew. There were also some townhouses near there that had been turned into sort of a halfway house kind of setup. My job was to stay up front and check people out while the stocking team replenished shelves. They'd do their best to keep an eye on me and help me feel safe up there on my own, but I was still kind of exposed a lot of the time. The lady from the halfway house got a job at one of them plants, and she would come in to buy a Red Bull and Long John donut from her lunch break. She would flirt with me a few times until I shut her down as gently as I could. She seemed to take it okay. But then the stock team started bringing me all this weird shit they were finding in the shelves when she'd come in. She kept trying to hide these little love notes. One time, there was one of those cheap teddy bears with the heart, etc. It was always the same. "I know you like me, and you're just playing. I like you too, but I'm not playing." The whole thing was weird and creepy, but I left for school soon enough anyway. What made it scary is that I later found out she'd been in prison for murdering her roommate. I had just been promoted to manager at a fast food place. It was my first shift in charge, and it was a closing shift on a Sunday night. We closed at midnight. And although all the closers are supposed to leave together for safety purposes, I wanted to save on hours since it had been a slow night, so I sent the closers home early while I finished my paperwork in the office. There was a big glass window in the office that opened toward the front of the restaurant, so you could still see what was happening while sitting at the desk. As I was finishing up some paperwork, I suddenly saw two guys in street clothes who I'd never seen before enter the restaurant and start walking back towards the office. I grabbed the box cutter on the desk next to me as they got near the office, and as the one guy reached the doorway, he said, "Sup?" and walked right past to the back of the restaurant and opened the back door. It turns out they were the delivery guys. I didn't know they had keys and could just walk in. For a second, I thought I was about to fight for my life. You would think that the general manager or somebody would have told you that they're going to get deliveries after closing. I'm glad you kept that box cutter in your pocket. So, all worked out. Was working at a copper mine in central Nevada. On a dark summer night, I was told to go down into the bottom of the pit we were digging to fuel our diesel shovel. For reference, it's about a 10-minute drive from the top of the pit to the bottom. Anyways, nobody was working in that pit, so I was the only person at the bottom of that pit while fueling. A few weeks earlier, we had dug up old mine shafts from the early 1900s, so the whole time I was fueling, I felt like I was being watched by someone or something. I was instinctually looking over my shoulder every few seconds. I'm not a small person, I'm 6'5" and was about 300 pounds, but I felt something malicious was watching me the whole time. When I was 18, I got a gig working as a security guard at an old folks' home. While doing my nightly patrols at around 2 a.m., I came across a little sweet old lady sitting in her wheelchair outside of her room. She waved me over and asked me if I can tell the children that were visiting to stop running in the halls and trying to play with her because she was trying to sleep. I resumed my patrols looking and listening for these kids and found nothing. I returned back to the main nurse's desk and told them what had happened. They stared at me and told me that they had a high turnover rate due to people quitting because they see and hear weird things at night. Turns out, the place was an old orphanage in the 30s that had burned down and killed a few kids. I no longer work night shifts, but I did briefly work nights at a gas station by my home. One of our regulars was a younger guy. I believed he was homeless because he would come in numerous times a day and numerous times per shift. So I think he came in about 10 to 12 times a day and would often just stand around talking to staff and rarely ever purchased anything unless it was something small. For the most part, he seemed harmless. He came in more than once while I worked alone at night and would just chat with me. He had a lot going on, but he was always incredibly polite and never stole, so I wasn't bothered by him. I'd give him free drinks from the fountain. These were free drinks the company gave me, but I only drank water, so I never took advantage. And I would let him dress up frozen yogurt samples with candy. Truly the only thing I did that was against the rules, but I didn't do it often enough for anyone to care. One night, he came in while the training manager was visiting. Because the manager was training, she was in the back with my manager, and they were in the cooler where you can really hear much of what's up front. I was alone on the floor. He comes in and, per usual, chats with me. I give him a drink and some frozen yogurt, and we chat a few minutes. He starts venting about how badly things are going for him and how badly he's been feeling lately. He then pulls out a butterfly knife from his bag. He starts talking about hurting or killing himself. Scared the crap out of me. I talked him down as best I could and sent him on his way. Management had a piss-poor response to the whole thing. I hope that man is okay wherever he is these days. I used to work in a 24-hour grocery store when I was 16. Not necessarily night shift, but I had to stay there until 11 by myself. Day manager left at 10. Third shift came. It's in a sketchy town with a lot of drugs and right next door to a trailer park where a lot of them walk over. I was manning the self-scanners and two guys came in buying stuff. The one was checking out while the other just stood by me asking me all kinds of questions. What's your name? How old are you? And then started asking if he could smoke me up once I was done with my shift. He asked me what time I got out, and I lied and said whenever my manager tells me I can go home because I didn't want them to know when I was off, which was soon. He asked for my manager, and the look on my face must have given it away that I was there alone. Started touching my arm, trying to persuade me to leave. Scariest thing ever. I had no idea what to do. Luckily, third shift girl decided to come early that night and interrupted it. I'll preface this that I genuinely am not a superstitious person at all. I used to work overnights alone at a group home to pay for college. Just me, 5'3" female college student, and 12 kids between ages 12 and 18. There was one other staff member for the day shift, usually physically present for ratios, but they were asleep and locked in an upstairs bedroom. It was pretty quiet work most of the time, and I could get homework done during the wee hours, which was pretty handy. The house was donated to the agency because the family who had lived there didn't want it anymore. For some reason, my boss wouldn't go into it. Part of my overnight routine was to go down to the basement and finish up any laundry the boys hadn't finished during the day. Frankly, just being involved with the laundry of 12 adolescent boys was scary enough to warrant a story here. Anyway, there was a walk-in supply cupboard down there where we kept detergent, etc., so sometimes I'd have to go in and pick up some soap, etc. The storage area had its own light, but the basement as a whole just had a single bulb hanging over the washer. So, coming out from the comparatively bright storage into the dark basement was always a little creepy. Multiple times, I saw what I can only say looked and felt like someone in white rushing past out of the corner of my eye while bending into the washers, fishing out clothes. I was particularly in one corner of the basement and had a very negative energy to it. Each time I would flip out and book it upstairs, locking the basement behind me. I felt stupid about this, but really couldn't stop myself. When later I finally explained it to my boss, when telling him why I really wanted to stay out of the basement, he confirmed that the family had donated the house because their father had hanged himself from a beam in that exact corner. I, female 33, worked the night shift at a small luxury hotel in my early 20s. It only had about 27 rooms. A man had a late check-in around 2:30 a.m. He asked if we had a business station. He needed to pop onto a computer for a second and check his emails and make sure he had a flight lined up. We only had one in the hotel lobby that you can see from the front desk. For reference, the hotel lobby is on a busy street corner with glass windows, so anyone driving by or walking by can look inside. I pointed over to it and said he could use it. He promptly got on it and started looking at porn and had the volume up all the way. I gave it a second because I thought maybe it was a mistake or he clicked on some pop-up. He proceeded to take his dick out of his pants. I didn't know what to do. I checked the cameras to see if the security guard was around and I paged him, but I couldn't find him anywhere. Apparently he had the night off. I said something along the lines of, "Excuse me, sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the lobby." He ran over to the counter and half jumped on it, grabbed me by the forearm, and he says, "What did you just effing say to me?" I pressed the buzzer under the counter for the cops to come. Luckily, there was a patrol cop just outside who saw this happen and ran over from across the street. He handcuffed the guy and called for backup. A female officer came to check on me and talked to me about everything and took some notes for the report. She asked for the information that he had on file and what ID and credit card information he gave, etc. Apparently, this man was a wanted criminal from another country for child trafficking and used fake IDs and had been on the run for a long time. I had to work the rest of my shift until another employee came in the next morning. I told my boss what happened, and he just said, "Oh, sorry I had to deal with that." I found a new job pretty quickly after that.